Hello and welcome back to the Skylark song. Are you ready for chapter 11? Sometime later, a man wearing the black uniform of a seneschal swung open the door and stepped into the room. Like all Air Patrol apprentices, Robin had studied the different iterations of Klonn military garb. She never thought she'd see one of these close up. Only diplomats and high-ranking officers had the honor of a personal secretary and valet. Whoever was holding Robin and occupied this house, he or she was important. The seneschal hadn't even knocked, and he'd said nothing when he came in. He didn't even meet her eyes. He carried a large porcelain ewer that steamed gently and filled the air with the scent of lilacs, and he carried it over to the wash basin and set it down in the matching bowl. Then he went to each of the gas lamps that ringed the room and, with a key he pulled from his pocket, turned the darkness into blazing, warm light. His expression remained as blank and as unreadable as the soldiers in the forest, just this side of disdainful. Robin stayed on the bed, sitting perfectly still, and watched every deliberate motion he made with care, as if such mundane tasks would prove the secret to her escape. She wondered how he felt about imprisoning a fellow human like this, if, indeed, he even saw Seelies as human. From the talk she'd sometimes heard in the pilot's lounge, she wondered if all soldiers, no matter what side of the war they were on, thought of their enemies as inhuman, soulless monsters. The seneschal returned to the hall, and before Robin could stand and barge out of the open door, he brought in a long, flat box, bound with a flouncy blue ribbon, and offered it to her. When Robin refused to take it, he placed it on the foot of the bed within her reach. Then, still without saying a word, he folded his hands behind his back and glanced meaningfully at the bow. "You can't be serious," Robin said with a snort. Wonder turned to mulishness, and she stuck out her chin in defiance. "What if I don't want to open it?" He may not have understood her words. She had no idea if he spoke Saskwyan or not, but her tone made her opinion quite clear. "Then my heart will be broken," said the Coyote from the hallway. The seneschal stepped back just enough to let him enter. He was still wearing the helmet and a lazy, smug smile to boot. His clothing was less formal, though. Crisp black trousers, sharp dress shoes, and an almost painfully white blouse under an ice blue waistcoat embroidered with silver wolves. Of course. "Come, come, open it," he urged. "I don't want a gift. I want to know where I am," Robin countered. The Coyote waved the question away and stepped meaningfully to the side of the bed, waiting expectantly with his hands folded behind his back, just like the seneschal. Robin crossed her arms across her chest, just for variety. The seneschal's fingers settled around the hilt of his knife, sheathed on his hip. Robin gave in to the urge to roll her eyes and picked up the box. It was light. It didn't rattle. It didn't smell like petrol or cordite, and there were no ticking sounds, no whirring gears. She pulled at the ribbon. She almost would have preferred a bomb. Inside the box was a dress. An insult of a dress in royal blue silk trimmed with bleached white lace. Lace! Ugh! There were hair ribbons of a matching blue and a tiny satchel of cosmetics pots, petticoats, bloomers, bustles! Horrible! There was even a second smaller box containing sparkling drop earrings and absurdly ornate necklace that resembled nothing so much as a dog's collar made of diamonds, hung with a cascade of sapphires. Clonnish soldiers, and in mimicking them, the nobility, wore blue. Saskwyan palettes tended towards the mundane, the camouflaged, the easily cared for. The olive drab of ground patrol uniforms and the fawn of the air patrol, the shades of flame amid the bene nobility that deliberately set themselves apart from their blue enemy. The insult in this gift was pointed and obvious. Robin spread it all out on the bed and raised an eyebrow at the Coyote. This is a joke, right?" "Of course not," the Coyote said. "I assumed. Well, a good wash and a nice new dress always seems to do wonders for the moods of fine ladies, and my guests are always welcome to—" "First," Robin interrupted, standing on her good foot and jamming a pointed finger at the helmet's lupine nose plate, "I'm not your guest. Second, I'm no fine lady. And third, I'm not your dolly. The sound of the seneschal's dagger being drawn was a sharp, clear hiss in the jammed, startled silence of the room. Robin couldn't be sure, but she thought she saw, just for a second, sheer, vulnerable panic in the coyote's eyes. He didn't do anything so obvious as lick his lips or swallow hard, but his pale eyes flicked to the doorway just once before the smug sneer was back. There's no need for that, he said in Saskwya, and then added something in rapid Klonnish that Robin couldn't possibly hope to catch. He waved dismissively at the seneschal, and the man resheathed his dagger, turned sharply on his heel, exited, and yanked the door shut behind him. Again, the coyote didn't do something quite so obvious as sag on the spot, but the lines of tension around his eyes immediately eased, and his shoulders went loose. Relief screamed out of his posture like a signal flare, for all that he had barely moved. "Do not do that again," the coyote said, his voice weary. Robin wished that she could see more of his face, read his expression, understand what was happening, but every part of his face, except his mouth and chin and the sliver of his eyes, was hidden from her. "Do what?" Robin asked, taking an experimental step towards the door, seeing how close he'd let her get. She was barefoot and hobbled. She wouldn't get far, but it was better than staying here, docile, alone in a room with a man who'd stalked her across the sky. "Defy me so openly, especially in front of him." He made a disgusted sound in his throat and, in a flash, had her wrist gripped hard in his hand. "And stop testing boundaries as well. There is nowhere for you to run in this place that they would not find you in a trice. You waste your time and energy dwelling on that which will not be." "What game do you think we're playing here?" Robin challenged, flicking a gesture between them. "This little back and forth of yours, the dress, calling me my dear, which is rutting condescending, by the way. What is all this?" The coyote rocked back on his heels, a grin spreading on his face. "You do not fear me." "Of course I don't fear you," Robin snarled. "I told you that, not anymore, and especially not when you're acting like some Benny prig with a stupid crush." "But you used to," the coyote asked. He reached out and brushed his leather-clad thumb over her cheek again. This time, Robin had the movement to duck away from the motion. "But back when this was bruised, did you fear me then? Tell me, my dear, who struck you that day?" "A scrubbed-up little calf who thought his father's position meant he could tell me what to do," she shot back with a meaningful glower. The coyote surprised her by throwing back his head and offering up a full-bellied laugh. Oh, this is going to be difficult." "What is?" Robin snarled, hands balling into fists as she fought down the urge to slug another self-important prig who was asking for it. Instead of answering, the coyote had the gall to turn his back on her and smooth the dress down over the coverlet. "Do you not like it? I will admit women's fashion is not entirely my forte, but I have never had a lady decline so luxurious a gown before." Robin stood very still and tried very hard not to make it look like she was thinking of reaching for the knife in the tongue of her boot. She waited until she was absolutely certain that he couldn't see her before she dipped down to retrieve it. "Give dresses to women a lot, do you?" Robin sneered. The question did exactly what she wanted. It made him straighten, affronted by the insult inherent in the barb. This put him in the exact right position to stab up under his ribs and into his kidney. She lunged forward, blade flashing in the light of the gas lamps. Robin's reflexes were quick, but the coyote's were quicker. He whirled on his heel, snatched her hand out of the air, braced his palm against her bicep, and heaved Robin up over his shoulder to slam against the mattress on her back. The air woofed out as her bruised ribs were jolted, and she groaned, curling in on herself, all the fight knocked out of her, along with her breath. "This is exactly what I mean," the coyote said, staring down at her, his hand still wrapped around her wrist. He squeezed hard, grinding her bones together, and Robin held on to the little knife for as long as she could. When the pain became too much, she whined and let go. The knife dropped into the coyote's waiting hand. She figured she'd never see it again, had played her one ace too soon. And then, inexplicably, and within full view of her, he tucked it back into the tongue of her boot. right into the pouch she'd thought he didn't know about. He must have been the one to take my boot off when he brought me in here, she realized. That's when he found it, but why didn't he say anything then? Why didn't he take it? Why? Robin asked when he let go of her, cradling her bruised wrist against her belly. He leaned over her slightly, looking nearly comical from upside down and tilted to the side. Because, my dear, we are going to be partners, and I want you to trust me. Robin snorted. Fat chance. Your only chance, the Coyote corrected, and he tapped his index finger deliberately in the middle of her forehead. Use more of that wily brain I saw when we danced, my dear, and less of that seely brawn. Then he paused and lifted the fringe of her hair between his fingers, rolling it as if considering the texture. Fascinating. It is spreading. Robin batted him away. Go jump in a frozen river, you rutting coal bag! Such strong language from a Seelie. The Coyote chuckled again. Then he stepped back. Robin scrambled as much as her injuries allowed and swung around to face him, kneeling on the mattress, flicking her braid back over her shoulder. Something white flickered in the side of her vision, but she kept her eyes on her enemy. Leave me alone. Very well, the Coyote said, taking a dramatic step backwards and spreading his arms to the side like a showman. Get yourself dressed. Dinner is in 1 hour. Dinner? Robin echoed, aghast. Yes, I would have you dine with me, the Coyote said, as if asking your arch-nemesis to a meal like a besotted beau was a normal occurrence. I will relish sharing the right way to do it with you. You mean the Klonn way? Is that not what I said? The Coyote asked with an impish head tilt, and Robin had to remind herself that this was a tactic, a ploy, some sort of strange torture, because the Coyote, the scourge of the Saskwyan Air Patrol, absolutely was not flirting with her. Clean yourself up. You reek of blood and smoke, my dear, and put on the dress. You will like it once you see how well it looks on you. Not running likely, Robin shot back. Then you will look proper, at least. He chuckled again, and then backed the rest of the way to the door. A light rap on the frame, in a complicated pattern done behind his back, had the door opened from the outside. He had slipped through it, and it was closed again behind him before Robin even managed to get her feet on the floor. Comins, she thought. She hobbled to the door and yanked on the knob, but it was firmly locked, just as she had expected. Now what? Robin turned back to the bed and regarded the dress with contempt. She was half tempted to strike the glass from the gas lamps and hold the fabric in the flame, but that would probably set the room on fire and trap her with no way to escape. She filed that thought away for later, though. Maybe she could set fire to the curtains when her ankle was healed enough to allow her to run. Then she thought of the wealth of jewels she might escape with, if only she managed to do so while wearing them, and what they might mean not only for her family, but for the Air Patrol. The necklace alone could probably fund the construction of at least 3 new gliders. Wash, the bastard had said, and now that the idea was in her head, she couldn't ignore the realization that she, smelled. Dried blood and dirt scratched at her skin, crusted around her cuffs and collar, and Robin had to admit that the thought of a wash and fresh clothing was rather appealing. The sleeves of her shirt were in tatters, and her leather pants had suffered the brunt of her unsuccessful flight through the forest. Neither covered much of her limbs anymore, and the buttons had popped off her undervest in her struggles against the soldiers, leaving it to gape obscenely. As much as she hated to admit it, the dress would be better protection against the elements than what she currently wore when she ran. Grudgingly, she gathered up the cosmetics pots and dumped them on the vanity. Al's goggles were hanging from the post that held up the mirror, and she snatched them up, cradling them close to her heart. Oh, gods, I still have them. I didn't even check. She set the goggles aside with the solemn reverence the last relic of a loved one deserved and, with a grimace, turned her attention back to the cosmetics. She had no idea what half the creams and powders were for, but the hair pomade and the lip rouge were familiar from Mama's collection. There was something whitish and creamy that came away on her fingers thickly. If this was supposed to be some sort of blemish-covering thing, it certainly wasn't made for her Seelie complexion. She wiped it off on the swath of black lace that covered the mirror and closed the jar. There was a small bottle of what Robin assumed was perfume, as it smelled pungently of rotting lilacs, and was overwhelming when added to the scent of the water in the washstand. She hid that bottle behind the wardrobe. There were also fresh bandages and an unguent that smelled strongly of mint. It reminded her of the molasses-like cream Wrench had given her for her palms, and she could well guess what that was for. Struggling around her hurts, Robin managed to get herself out of what was left of her tattered uniform. She frowned to see that her unwanted host had also provided the necessary undergarments for the dress, along with the silken chemise and bloomers and the heavily starched multi-layered petticoats. She left the underbust corset in its box, firstly because she didn't have the faintest idea of how to lace herself into such a thing alone, and secondly because her damaged ribs wouldn't thank her for it if she tried. Also, for all that Al had admired them, her breasts were not so big as to actually need that kind of support. Washing quickly, lest the seneschal walk in on her while she was unclothed, Robin donned the undergarments, smeared the unguent on her hands, still powerfully blistered from her attempt to land the glider, and bound them with the bandages. She sat at the vanity to attempt to wrestle her hair into some semblance of order. It felt tangled and greasy, her scalp aching from where the coyote had wrapped his hands in the tight braid. She found a brush in the vanity drawer, but no comb, no hairpins, no ornate decorations, nothing that could be used to stab someone's eyes with. Her host was proving to be annoyingly clever. Sighing, she pulled the swath of lace off the glass and screamed. "Oh! Oh, God!" She gasped and jumped up from the chair, nearly toppling it when she forgot about her ankle and put her weight on it. In the mirror, the horrifying white thing backed away, large and puffed and angry. Robin's eyesight blurred in fear, and though her pilot-stern stomach held fast, she felt like every other bit of her insides had crumpled into a ball of terror. She whipped her head around, head craning, ankles screaming, trying to spot the thing that was casting the reflection. Nothing. No one. She was alone, completely alone in the room. A whimper leaked from between Robin's teeth, and she clapped her hand over her mouth, forcing herself to breathe shallowly to listen. No other sound save the crackle of the lamps, and her own breaths filled the shadows. Still, she was breathing so hard. What if there was something here she couldn't hear? Something in the corner that... Robin turned back to the mirror. The white thing was still there. But there was nothing behind her. Robin held perfectly still, and the thing in the mirror did the same. Robin blinked until her vision was clear, and then, suddenly, realization slammed into her like summer lightning. In the mirror, her own face had turned yellow-green in shock. Her fingers spasmed into horrified claws. She saw it happening, but she couldn't feel it. She was numb with confusion and terror. Her feet were moving. She was backing up, and then the end of the bed smacked against her thighs, and she sat, eyes wide, mouth open, staring. "Omens," she breathed, and reached up and yanked at a lock of hair that had fallen over her forehead, pulling it around so she could stare at it with her own eyes. Her braid, when she pulled it over her shoulder and into view, was streaked through with white. In a panic, she turned and looked at the bed. The pillow was littered with long brown hair. With trembling fingers, she pulled at the tie and detangled her braid. Clumps of dirty, sparrow-colored hair came away in her hands, spreading across the carpet like deadfall. Only the white hair remained. "What could do this?" she wailed. Nobody answered. "What could make hair turn white?" Shaking, she forced herself back to the vanity to meet her own honey-brown eyes in the reflection. They were wide and scared-looking. Carefully, she picked up the brush and, starting from the bottom, worked her way through her braid. She had to stop frequently to pull off all the dead hair and dried foliage from the bristles. The white didn't brush out. It didn't go away. "I'm a ghost," she said. "A nowhere person. Oh, gods. Am I not a Seelie anymore?" She'd heard of the ghosts, of course, but she'd never met them. The babies born blessed by the gods with colorless skin and white hair and rabbit eyes. The people who could pass anywhere because They had no hair color to delineate their heritage. They were the lucky ones. That's what people said. They could be at home everywhere because they looked like they came from nowhere. Robin didn't feel lucky. She felt punished. What had she done? What had been so horrible that the gods felt she deserved to lose her heritage, her culture, everything that she'd fought so hard for, had given up her hands and her best friend for? Why had they stolen everything that made Robin a Seelie? Was it because she had stolen first and frequently to get her glider in the air? Was it because she'd failed to down the Coyote? "I'm sorry," she said, raising her palms to the ceiling, eyes squeezed shut. "I don't know what I've done, but I'm sorry. Just please, please, give it back." She opened her eyes and looked in the mirror, but her hair remained white. Okay, she said to herself calmly. Calmly, there must be a reason. I just don't know it yet. I need to stay calm. I need to escape. Stop being vain, Captain, and start being smart. Use that brain of yours. She tapped her index finger against her forehead in the same spot the Coyote had. She took a few minutes to breathe deep and slow, the way they taught pilots who flew too high and banked too fast. Even though it was a simple exercise, it made Robin feel more in control. Her hands stopped shaking, and she used the leftover wash water to rinse her substantially thinned hair clean. With the blue ribbons, Robin managed to bind it into a single braid and coiled it up at her nape to cover the bald spots and to keep it out of yanking range of the Coyote. She smoothed her eerie fringe with the pomade and rifled through the little pots until she found a moisturizing cream. That went under her eyes and on her nose, where her crying had left the skin raw and dry. She put on a little of the lip and cheek rouge. She had no idea if Klonn women lined their eyes with charcoal the way Seelie women did. As she found no smudging stick and no matches, she guessed not. She disdained the flimsy blue slippers in the box and put her sturdy boots on instead. Her wrapped foot was tight, but the lacing supported her weak ankle enough that she thought she might be able to walk on it for a short distance. Then she stepped into the dress and managed to wriggle around enough to fasten up the ridiculously small buttons that climbed up the center of her stomach. The dress was dismayingly low against her chest, but at least her musculature kept it from gaping too much at the front. Her shoulders were far too broad for a Klonn noblewoman's fashion. The collar was square cut, and it made her look mannish. The skirts billowed behind her, dragging on the carpet. Robin felt muffled by the sheer volume of the shimmering fabric. When she was finished, Robin stared at the door expectantly, wondering if she was supposed to knock to let them know she was done. Then she decided that if the Coyote had deemed she should play dress-up, then he could damn well wait. She crawled back up onto the bed, spread out her skirts, closed her eyes, and counted backwards from 100. It helped to keep her mind from wandering to places that she frankly didn't want it to go.
Give up when you're down. Fly as long as you can.